The train from Helsinki to Rovaniemi rattled like a box of bolts, windows fogged by breath, while snow crews in orange parkas scraped platforms that vanished under new drifts. Hanna Koskinen watched birch trunks and river ice smear past and tried not to reread the last message from her brother. Don't call the police. Come alone. Kätkävaara Ridge. Midnight. He hadn't answered since. For 2 months he'd been undercover with a logging outfit suspected of moving contraband under cover of night loads. Her boss said to let the authorities handle it. Her boss didn't have Alexi's stubbornness in his bones. In the compartment across, a young conscript slept with a rifle case wedged under his knees. An old woman clicked needles with a rhythm like a heartbeat. Hanna read landscapes for a living, land survey specialist for a mining firm, and knew how snow could lie. It looked soft. It was teeth. At Rovaniemi the wind knifed the platforms, slewing pellets of ice sideways. She shouldered her pack and crossed the station, head down. The night was the flat grey of Arctic towns, a light with no source. She rented a studded Hilux from a kiosk, paid cash, and headed west on a road that could vanish between breaths. Alexei had taught her winter driving on a lake when she was 17. Hands loose. Brakes are a story you tell the car. The further she drove, the emptier it got. Kittila flashed by as a smear of pump lights and a company banner stiff with rhyme. Sustainable growth in the north. Beyond that, the ploughs abandoned pretenses. The road narrowed to one lane, a mutual pact with the trucks. Once, a camp appeared on the right. Portable cabins, 2 security towers, the cough of a generator. A man stood smoking with his hood back despite the cold. She didn't slow down. Her phone chirped with no bars, a ghost notification, the echo of coverage. She pulled onto a turnout and killed the engine, letting the silence press on her ears. When her gloves squeaked on the wheel, she realized her hands were shaking. She checked her kit. Satellite communicator. Headlamp. Map in plastic. A tiny flare gun. A light rifle with rubber-wrapped stock. She'd hated carrying it until the week a wolf paced her crew for 2 days. She chambered nothing. Old habit. Load only where you mean to use it. The ridge lay 30 minutes further, a black belt on her map. She started the engine and the radio hissed alive on a dead station, a blurt of voices, laughter cut too short. Hanna slapped it off, feeling foolish, and watched. Snow flared in the high beams like thrown salt. She took a right onto a forestry road, then another onto what could only be called intention. Branches scrolled. The slope rose as if under her. Headlights bloomed in the mirror. A pair, low and wide. A truck, closing. Hanna's pulse beat hard enough to rock her ribs. Maybe just another night driver. Maybe help. The truck stayed on her through 2 turns, lights turned down to foxfire, then brightened to daylight, horn yawping once. Hanna pulled right to let it pass. It didn't. The horn yawped again, longer. She eased to a stop and cracked the window. The truck stopped behind her, engine a slow animal. A door opened. A man trudged up, shoulders wide, reflective tape scuffed to grey. He kept his hood up. "You're off the public road," he said. "No greeting." "I'm meeting someone on the ridge," she said. "My brother. No vehicles tonight." He leaned to peer over her dashboard, eyes flicking once to the empty passenger seat. "Turn around. He works for. Turn around." In the silence she heard the faint chirr of a radio turned way down, a woman's voice reciting numbers. "Not police. Not rescue. Your plates are from Rovaniemi," he said. "Tourist." "Work," she said, and turned the wheel. He didn't move. She had to ease around him, the mirror giving a fisheye of a bearded jaw and a scar like a rail line. He didn't return to his truck until she'd passed. In her mirror, the truck waited, then reversed out of the road altogether, letting her go, which is how you say stay without admitting you said it. She drove another 5 minutes, engine a metronome. Then she killed the lights and coasted into a shallow drift until the car bogged. She took her pack and rifle, left the keys in the cup holder, and stepped into the cold. Breath bit her teeth. Somewhere out there, Alexei had asked for her alone. She would not bring a truck with a scar to him. She pulled her hood tight, clicked off the headlamp, and listened. Snow ticked. Far uphill, something metal clanged once, wind hardened, a comb dragged across the ridge. Hannah kept to the tree lean where spruce gave shelter from the side-blown snow. The forestry road became a white ribbon, then a guess. Her headlamp haloed flakes and betrayed her to anything watching, so she used it low and infrequently, letting her eyes learn the dark. The cold was clean and tyrannical. Noise carried forever, then fell at her boots as if cut. She found the first sign of Alexei at a bend where snow had crusted over boot tracks. The step length matched his impatient gait. In the middle of the road a circle had been scuffed clear to gravel, as if someone had planted a tripod or set a case down. She crouched, gloved fingers hovering. In the headlamp's rim she saw the silver wink of a SIM card. She slid it into her pocket, pulse turning hot, and scanned for fresh marks. A snowmobile had cut through not long before, its tracks still sharp, the fine powder blown only at the edges. It had come from the ridge and returned the same way. She lifted her head. The trees made a low whisper, as if disagreeing. She left the road and climbed. The snow was thigh-deep between drifts, and the hill steeper than the map's low lines suggested. Twice she had to kick steps where wind had hardened a crust. At the ridge top the gusts were strong enough that she had to lean into them. The lights of the camp she'd passed were a weird constellation below, the towers blade-thin. "Alexei," she called once, half a sentence swallowed by wind. Calling twice felt like begging. She took out the satellite unit, coaxed it to life, and typed a message to him anyway. "I'm here." "Where?" The reply came from the trees in a voice that was his and not his, thin with cold and recorded. "Don't call the police. Come alone." Her headlamp picked the small black lozenge of a dictaphone wedged between roots. She pressed play. There was a scrape first, then boot steps, then his voice again. "They know. Someone got to the police. It's all connected, sis." The recording cut into a hiss that echoed like surf. Hannah scanned the ground and found more prints. Not just Alexei's. Another pair, wider, and the splay of feet who had already given up lifting their boots. Drag marks scarred the leeward side of the ridge. Beyond, in a hollow, she found a cluster of snow ghosts, tarps bowed under weather, tied to saplings with builder's twine, corners flapping. Under one she felt wooden slats. Crates. Padlocked. The tarp smelled of diesel and something sweet like hospital floors. The zipper on the nearest tarp had been cut and reclosed with cable ties. Inside, a crate had been pried open, its lid leaning. Hannah levered it with a stick. Under straw lay plastic jugs labeled in Cyrillic with hazard diamonds. The names were familiar from environmental reports she'd signed with gritted teeth. Solvents and nerve-twitching intermediates. Black trade for clean gold. A twig popped behind her. Hannah spun, rifle up. The snowmobile's engine was already whining, its headlight pitching through trees. She killed her lamp and dropped. The first pass was a search circle. The light swung and pinned the tarps, lingered on the open crate, then moved on. She crawled between twin drifts and pushed the crate lid back into place with a rifle barrel. The second pass tightened. She could see the rider's outline now. Bulky parka, snow mask, the posture of someone willing to drive into people. The machine idled on the ridge lip, a white dragon breathing. Hannah's breath fogged her scarf. She felt it freeze. Alexei would have shouted by now. A reckless idiot, he would have blown it. Unless he couldn't. The snowmobile surged away and then lunged back like a hooked fish, its light cutting low. It stopped so close that cold air from the vented hood blew into her cover. A voice barked, pitched up in the wind. "Come out!" The accent was local, vowels shaved. Hannah didn't move. Her fingers trembled on the stock. Somewhere to her left a branch cracked under weight. Another person on foot. She moved her eyes, not her head, and saw a smudged shape detach from a tree. "I can see you," the rider lied, bravado edging on fear. The smudge stepped closer to the machine. 2. Hannah thought of the SIM card in her pocket and what it meant. Alexei had known they would strip his phone. He had left her a breadcrumb flatter than a crumb. She pressed her chest harder into the snow, let her own weight excavate a little shelf, and counted heartbeats to 10. "If you want her, go fetch," the rider said to the one on foot, mocking, and laughed alone. The smudge swore, angry at being ordered. Boots crumped closer to her. She wormed deeper, the snow giving with sugary squeaks. Boot shadows crossed the halo of the machine's light. A gloved hand raked across the drift's top and came away with loose powder. The hand vanished. The snowmobile's engine revved. The bow wave of blown snow rolled over her cover, and then, suddenly, the engine bogged and died. The rider cursed. Hannah heard a wet cough from the machine, the bleak click of a flooded starter, then silence so firm it held her down. In that silence came a different noise entirely, metal on metal, faint but steady, ringing from uphill like a flagpole halyard in a storm. She raised her head a finger's width. The ringing came again, not wind, a cable striking a mast. Between two pines a line ran taut into the dark, crusted with rime. It led toward a higher knob. The rider kicked the starter. The machine coughed and quit. The man on foot cursed and tromped toward the road. Hannah slid from her hollow and moved uphill in short bursts, using pauses between gusts. The line vibrated under a weight she couldn't see. At the knob's crest she found a tripod and a winch. The cable vanished over a cut bank toward a ravine. Hannah lay flat at the knob's edge and peered over. The ravine was a white throat, spruce leaning inward like teeth. The cable ran down to a shadowed ledge where a pallet had been lashed to a sled. On it sat 2 sealed barrels and a black crate. A rope dangled from the sled's front toward the ravine floor. The rope twitched once, as if pulled. "Alexei," she whispered, then bit the inside of her cheek. Sound went strange in hollows. It did tricks. She anchored herself with her axe and slid down on her hip, bracing boots to control the fall. Powder geysered. At the ledge the wind eased and the cold deepened, as if cold could be deeper, until breath felt granular. The rope led under an overhang to a dimmer place where wind couldn't scour tracks. 2 sets of prints again. One dragged. The scuff of a knee here, a palm there. Hannah swung the headlamp to low and found a shape tucked into the rock wall, half buried, a person in a grey parka, face turned away, hood iced white. She touched a shoulder, and the body jerked violently awake, flinging powder. Alexei's face came up from the snow in a pale blur of stubble and chapped lips, eyes glittering with exhaustion and something like relief that didn't dare bloom into joy. He clutched her wrist as if testing whether she was wait or dream. "You shouldn't have come. You asked me," she said. "What is this?" "Exports," he said, breath hitching. "Not timber. Waste. Solvents, metals, precursors, all the things we pay to dispose of. They buy our guilt cheap and ship it to people who'll make something we'll pretend we didn't sell. It runs through shell companies, and the cops get told to hold their noses. Who's they? Old names with new logos. The camp below belongs to the firm that contracts half the region. Security's outsourced to men who used to work in war zones. I got inside the transport list. Someone saw my messages. They took my phone apart. I dropped the SIM where you'd find it. He coughed into his elbow, a dry bark that said hunger. I tried to jam the snowmobile. Sugar in the fuel. It won't restart properly. The winch. They were moving a shipment off the road to stash it. He nodded at the sled. A truck slid yesterday and got photographed. They're spooked. They'll use sleds until the storm clears. Hannah squeezed his hand once and let go. Can you walk? If I pretend to. He tried to stand. The first attempt failed. On the second, he got as far as kneeling. There were two. One stayed above, one came down. They argued about whether to finish me. I convinced them I'd frozen already. He smiled without humor. I have always been good at lying still. We need to move. They circled the sled. The barrels were strapped hard. Nothing rattled. The black crate had a tamper seal with a serial number and a company name Hannah recognized in the way you recognize your own mistake on a contract months later. Under the sled, the cable was looped around a steel eye. The winch had been left engaged. Each gust made the line ping faintly, her bell. They started along the ravine floor where drifts were shallow and spruce trunks could hide their movement. Hannah kept the lamp as low as possible, painting ice with a weak wafer of light. Twice she stopped with her hand up when snow shifted. Once something moved in the trees far above and clicked. Maybe a branch, maybe a bolt sliding home. Alexi's breath made a ragged metronome. I sent a copy of the transport list to a journalist in Oulu, he said. If anything happens to me, she'll publish. You should have kept your mouth shut until you were out, Hannah said, harsher than she meant. And let them keep burying drums along rivers the reindeer drink from? He made a low sound that might have been a laugh. Don't worry. I still have a filthy survival instinct. They found a cut where an avalanche had trimmed the ravine wall to a ramp. Sidestepping, they climbed toward the road. The wind returned with the openness. Hannah could see the blurring halo where the broken snowmobile sat. No one stood beside it. Snow had already softened its edges, making it look like a half-remembered animal. They made the last stretch in a crouch and dropped behind a berm of plough tailings. Down the slope, past sparse pines, the camp's lights harrowed the dark. The towers were taller than they had looked from below. There's a fence, Alexei said, but there's also a stream. They lay pipes through that gully. We follow the gully. We get through under the lowest strand. Why go in? Hannah asked, though she already knew. Proof. Transport list was words. Barrels were facts. Because the crates are labeled wrong on purpose, he said. You get me a live photo of loading. We send it with the list. Then I get an escort to Oulu, or you hand me over to someone you trust more than me. Hannah looked at him and saw not the boy who taught her to spin on ice, but a man thinner than he should be, stubborn enough to drag a world. She checked her rifle. The wind blew and changed, and with it came a smell that didn't belong to snow or diesel, something floral, masked by cold. She filed the worry without words. They slid into the gully, a white throat leading to darker brush. Barbed wire snagged Hannah's jacket and then let go, tooth by tooth. They bellied under the lowest strand, snow packed in their hoods and cuffs. The camp's perimeter lamps washed everything in a prison yellow. A dog barked once. It was the bark of an animal trained to signal, not to chase. That single sound moved people. Figures strode between cabins, quick and efficient. A door banged. A generator coughed and steadied. Hannah and Alexei flattened behind a stack of pallets. Through a gap she saw a forklift easing toward a loading bay, its tires gritted with chains. Men in the same grey parkas as the rider directed the forks under a crate twin to the one in the ravine. A voice spoke her name in her ear, private. She could taste the cigarette on its breath. Hannah! She turned slowly and saw the scar like a rail line. The man from the road knelt behind them, rifle low, eyes empty as snow. "If you move," he said, "the dog will do worse than I can." They were marched into heat that felt like a slap. The cabin smelled of wet wool, instant coffee, and that sweet floral note, faint but present. Frost fog steamed from their jackets. The scarred man closed the door with his heel and gestured to a bench. The other stood beside the wall, rifle half lowered, eyes on Alexei's hands. On a table lay a map with routes traced in yellow marker and a ledger with columns of dates and weights. A handheld meter like the one at the bay blinked a sleepy green. "Names," the scarred man said. "No," Hannah answered on reflex. He considered this, head slightly tilted, then shrugged. "Fine. I know them already. Hannah Koskinen, surveyor. Alexei Koskinen, temporary hire, security trainee, liar. You left good footprints." Alexei flinched at liar but didn't waste breath. "You going to shoot us, or waste time?" The scarred man sat opposite and put her phone on the table. "Either would be easy, but neither helps." He tapped the screen with a gloved knuckle. "You filmed what they do. But that video doesn't reach outside without someone to vouch it's this place, this night. A witness not already under suspicion." He turned to Hannah. "Your signature opened access roads that should not exist." Heat rose in her face. "I signed survey clearances. 4 timber. 4 winter work. If someone misused, they misused," he said, quiet. "And they kept papers to look clean. Your company stacks contractors so deep no one can reach the bottom. When it breaks, the bottom drowns." He slid a thumb drive across the table. "Black plastic, taped. Transport list, real one. Not the one your brother sent to a journalist we control. He thought he had a friend. He had my colleague pretending to be one, because the actual newsroom, let's say their landlord likes his rent on time." Alexei stared. "You catfished me? I kept you alive," the scarred man said. "If you'd sent the list to anyone else, someone from this camp would be in your flat before you finished your tea." He jerked his chin at the ledger. "Everything in this yard is illegal twice. The men who run it eat better than we do. The men I work for would prefer a quiet, corrective conversation. They do not believe in scandal. I do." Hannah frowned. "Then why block me on the road? Why the threat outside?" "Because my own radio has more ears than I prefer," he said. "And because I needed you to keep going on foot and to find your brother without a car tied to your name. The stalled machine above? That was sugar. The ringing cable? I left the winch hard to keep my people away while I walked the perimeter. Everything here is noise I made for one thing. You." The floral smell thickened, a cold perfume that sat at the back of her mouth. The other guard shifted and sniffed. "Boss." The meter on the table blinked from green to yellow. The scarred man's head snapped around. "Which barrel?" He asked the air and was already on his feet. "Goggles. What is that?" Hannah asked. "A catch tank leak," he said. "If it hits steam in the generator exhaust, we'll get a plume no one downwind forgets." He shoved the thumb drive across the table again, harder. You take this and go to the road checkpoint on 80, to the woman with the blue hat. She isn't mine. She's stubborn enough to die for paper. She'll call one of 3 prosecutors who still answers unblocked numbers. Alexei's face pinched. You're sending us out? Now. This is the part where I do something dumb, he said. I pull a fire alarm. I put everyone in masks and make them line up outside. In that mess, you walk. If I march you out at gunpoint, we all die on video in a way that helps nobody. He looked at Hannah until she looked back. You came because you still believe things can be clean. Keep believing that for 12 more hours. Alarms wailed, tinny and unreal, then grew teeth. Outside, men shouted. The dog barked in clipped notches. The other guard swore and ran for the door. The scarred man dragged open a locker and threw 2 masks onto the bench. Put them on, he said. Walk with the line. When you hit the fence, turn left to the gully. Do not run until the gully. Who are you? Hannah asked, mask half on. He looked oddly embarrassed. A man who learned to live with his scar by making worse scars on paper, he said. Go. They were shoved into a hallway that smelled of coffee turned bitter. A door banged open to night where floodlights flickered under the wind, turning snow into a ballet of static. Men clattered into lines. Someone yelled names and numbers. The meter at the bay screamed now. A smoke alarm translated into chemistry. Hannah and Alexei joined the line, masks fogging, eyes watering. No one looked closely. Everyone looked too closely. The yard became a row of animals who all knew the gate was open and that running meant teeth. They passed the forklift. The barrels on the nearest crate had frost flowers blooming on their seams. The sweet note turned metallic and made her jaw ache. The scarred man stood on a pallet, waving his arms, pointing men to spread out into the wind. He was everywhere at once, and when he wasn't, the yard worked anyway because of his last command. At the fence a knot had formed by the gully as a wheelbarrow jammed the gap. Hannah and Alexei shouldered through. The barbed wire snagged and then let go, tooth by tooth. They slid, bellies wet, into the cold stream. Behind them someone shouted, "Stop!" in a voice Hannah knew was aimed at everyone and no one. They ran only when the gully hid them. Snow filled their footprints as they made them. In the trees the wind flattened to a steady breath. Hannah didn't realize she'd kept the mask until her lungs started to hurt from working so easily. They tore the masks off and kept moving toward the road. At the turnout where she had killed the engine earlier, a woman in a blue hat sat in an idling van, hazard lights tapping orange into the storm. She saw the shape of them and reached for the door. Koskinen! Hannah nodded and thrust the drive into the woman's hand. Words tumbled out. What, where, who, but the woman just drove, face set. I know the rest, she said. I've been waiting a year for someone to make this much noise. They reached the highway, a pale ribbon under half an inch of fresh. The van climbed and curved. Behind them, far away, a smear of light fanned up into the storm like dawn. For a second it looked beautiful. Is it burning? Alexei asked. It's being seen, the woman said. By noon, someone would leak their footage. By evening, someone would insist it was winter steam and panic. By midnight, the story would fork the way all stories did. Hannah pressed her forehead to the cold window and thought about signatures. She had signed access roads. She would sign her name to this. Later, when the message history was scraped, she would learn the last text summoning her north had not come from her brother's device at all. The sender had used Alexei's phrase, "Don't call the police," but placed the comma where he never would. In the dictaphone, his breath between syllables was wrong by half a beat. The scarred man hadn't lied about everything. He had staged an audience and given her a part. On some nights that would feel like exploitation. On this one, clinging to heat in a blue-hatted stranger's van while a forbidden light made the clouds glow, it felt like a clean wound, the kind that healed into something you could name. He tossed the thumb drive again. Take it. Blue hat at the road. An alarm started and he shoved masks at them. Walk with the line, he said. Outside, floodlights flickered. Men fell into rows. The scarred man climbed a pallet and waved them apart into cleaner air. Hannah and Alexei joined the stream. At the fence, a wheelbarrow jammed the gully. They forced through and slid into the creek. Only then did they run. At the turnout, a van idled. A woman in a knitted blue hat opened the door. Koskinen. Hannah pressed the drive into her palm. She threw the van into gear. They climbed toward the highway. In the mirror, a pale fan rose over the trees. Hannah watched until it smudged back into weather. The woman drove without speaking. At last she said, "The man with the scar called me last week. Said one night he'd light the sky. Said I'd know where to be." Alexei turned. "You know him. Only by the noise he makes," she said. "That's sometimes enough." At a checkpoint shack, she braked and pointed to a phone on a chained clipboard. "Tell them everything once," she said. "Then stop talking." Days later, when the messages were traced, Hannah learned the summons hadn't come from Alexei's phone. The punctuation was wrong. The dictaphone breath was wrong. The trap had been built to catch light. She thought of the man on the pallet and how he made order by shouting into bad wind. Maybe he was a liar. Maybe so was she. But the sky was bright enough that even liars could see at once.